everyone. Welcome to this week's IBSE's Forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. I'm your host today, Joshua Washington, the Executive Director of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. I will be going solo today. I won't have my lovely host with me this time, but we still have a few things to talk about nonetheless. First of all, before we get into anything, as we always remind you every week, you can become a legacy builder with Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. A legacy builder is someone who donates, but they give regularly. You can give a monthly amount to IPSE, anything that works for you and helps us continue to grow and do the work that we are doing. So please, as you're listening to this, if you enjoy what you're hearing, if you've been enjoying our Substack articles, if you've been enjoying the events that you might have gone to from us or anything like that, consider becoming a legacy builder. Help us to continue this important work. Also, and I'll be saying this a couple of times on this episode today, November 19th, for those who are in the Carolinas, for those who are in the Charlotte area, who are in the Fort Mill area, Fort Mill, South Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, the Monroe area, anywhere around there, we are having a Standing with Israel event. As you can see, there's November 19th at 6 p.m. At the River Place. There'll be music featured by the Hebrew Project and Joe Davi, which is myself. The Hebrew Project is a gospel, jazz, reggae, and different genres group that my father also produces, and I produce with him. There'll be lots of different speakers, community leaders. We're having people even fly in from different states for this event. It's going to be amazing, standing in solidarity with Israel and the Jewish people, and really just providing a night where we can show that solidarity in that big way. So please, if you are not too far away, come out, Fort Mill, South Carolina, for our Standing with Israel event. Hope to see you guys there. All right. Now, there's a few things, first of all, and next I want to also just, because, this is going to be this way for a while, right? Israel's at war, and we're already starting to see, and sorry, I forgot to mention this, and thank you, Judith, for saying something now. You saw the poster for the event on the 19th, for those who are looking on, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. If you're on Instagram, I'm sorry you can't see the poster, but I will post it again. There's two different, you see the IPSE logo, you see the Antioch International Church logo. That's the church we're partnering with. We have more partners as of, very, very recently. So we have to update the poster, but the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation is a partner of ours. They're doing a watch party, an online watch party from Toronto. They're also giving an address virtually as well. So we're really grateful for them. We've been working with our friends there on an event in April, an Africa-Israel event. So we're still doing that, but in light of these events, we're partnering together with this. We also have some help with our friends from Stand With Us. We also, there's a lot of partnerships going on here, and it only continues to grow as we're planning this. So tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell everyone, and tell them to come out if they're not too far away. All right. So yes, Israel's at war still. And as we can see, the disinformation campaign has already in full effect. Everything from the complete ignoring of October 7th, a dismissal of it as if it happened, 100 years ago, and even a denying of certain events, that there's still the dishonesty that's happening right now that we're seeing culturally, politically. It's like everyone has forgotten, and is blaming Israel for what's happening with the bombs that are falling on Gaza, not even mentioning the fact that rockets have been coming from Gaza since October 7th, right? That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest disinformation that, in my opinion, that I've been seeing, is that the reason for Israel's attack on Hamas in Gaza people are saying, oh, it's retaliatory. Israel's just mad because of what happened. They need to get over it, and they just want their hot. Which, by the way, Israel will be well within their rights to launch a retaliatory attack. Any country would do that. Israel will be well within their rights to launch an attack because Hamas hasn't given their captors back. Well within her rights. But that's not even the reason Israel is fighting. Israel is taking out rocket launchers that have been flying in over 10,000 rockets since October 7th. On October 8th, Hamas already had fired over 5,000 rockets. And we know this not only because of the Red Alert app that we have and from the reports we get from the IDF, but because there were anti-Israel protests in New York the day after. And on October 8th, there was a protest, a rally celebrating what happened. This was before Israel even launched any kind of response. There was a pro-Hamas rally in New York, and a young lady got up and she grabbed the microphone or the megaphone and she said, and we talked about this yesterday. We talked about this last week. She recounts what happened the day before when Hamas broke into Israel, broke into the music festival, shot a bunch of bullets at people, killed people, injured people, kidnapped people, raped, murdered, all that stuff. People were cheering for it. And then she goes on to say that since then, Hamas, she said, our resistance, but she's talking about Hamas, our resistance has fired 5,000 rockets into Israel, and everyone cheered again. So we have these facts not just because of the reports we got. For the Israel haters who say that the IDF lies, these reports we got from the Hamas supporters. They were celebrating it. And now all of a sudden we have collective amnesia and we're blaming Israel and chastising Israel for doing what literally any other country would have done. As a matter of fact, not even what any other country would have done. Other countries would have just flattened Gaza, carpet bombed the whole thing, killed all the civilians, and called it a day. Israel is actually doing way more than any other country would do in terms of trying to save civilians. We've forgotten about all that, and now we're acting like nothing happened and that Israel launched this attack and all that. So there's a big disinformation campaign that's happening right now. And we haven't even seen the worst of it yet. It's only going to get worse from here. And we see it globally. We are seeing it globally. There, I don't know who's seen this yet, but the African National Congress, the ANC, the ruling party in South Africa, put out a statement that said that the attacks on October 7th were unsurprising. And they say that the attacks on October 7th are unsurprising in their words because of Israel's continued occupation of Palestinian land. So now the ANC is coming out and saying that what happened, so Hamas breaking in, and we've heard and seen some of the things now that they've done. Bodies are still being counted and all that. We've learned that Hamas raped women. Hamas would rape women in front of their husbands, in front of their families. Hamas reports now, investigators have found babies in ovens. So Hamas would, for instance, one family, they killed the husband. They threw the baby in the oven, and then they raped the mother while she listened to her baby burn to death in the oven. They're finding babies roasted in ovens right now, right? So the ANC comes out with a statement saying, well, that's unsurprising because of the occupation. Wow. Okay. And someone just commented, and yes, I'm about to get to that, I promise, because this is going to be my central point with this. Someone commented and said, side note, the South African people, black and white, are less hateful than the ANC. And so this is the point that I want to bring home. So unlike the West, right now what's happening, and it's what happened in 2021, Israel's war with Hamas. Hamas was raining down thousands of rockets on Israel. And what happened was that anti-Jewish hate crimes rose globally over 800%. I forgot how much it rose in the United States, but it was a huge spike. Jews would be speaking Hebrew to each other in LA, and people would hear them speaking Hebrew and start attacking them. An Orthodox or Hasidic Jew would be walking down the street in New York. he would get beat up, he would get stabbed, he would get punched. An elderly Jewish woman will be coming home from the store. She would get beat up by young men. Right. This is what was happening all over the world. It was happening in Germany. It was happening in London. It was happening in Canada. It was happening in the U.S. So that's happening here. Contrast that with South Africa. The South African government put out the statement that it put out saying that basically Israel deserved what she got on October 7th. Strangely, though, anti-Jewish hate crimes did not spike in South Africa. The sentiment amongst the people in South Africa have not been antagonistic towards the Jewish people. And I want to talk about why that is. We've been saying this and saying this. We've written articles about this, but I'm going to just push this again because it's very important to contextualize what's actually happening here. And if I had my lovely co-host and our Speakers Bureau chief and my wife, Olga Mishroy Washington, I would have her break it down even more, being a South African national. But she's written articles. You can subscribe to our Substack, Africa Israel Weekly. Go to our website, ibsi.org, and click on Africa Israel Weekly. You can subscribe, become a paid subscriber to support us in that way as well. We've written articles touching on exactly this, which is the vast majority of the continent of Africa remains deeply and very, very boldly Zionist. Why? Because the vast majority of the continent of Africa is Christian, and they know their scriptures, and they have a very foundational love and support for the Jewish state of Israel. That has not changed in a long, long time. Why does the government not reflect the views of their people? A few years ago, I did a podcast episode, which you can also find on our Substack, with a man named John Ayayi. John Ayayi founded the Ghana-Israel Alliance, and he also we discussed for a few minutes why African leaders' decisions don't often reflect their people. And he breaks it down to talk about how, you have corruption, you have bribes, and you also have this influence, Islamist influence, whether there's bribes of money, promises of whatever it is. But those leaders know that their success and prosperity does not have to be linked to how well the country is doing. They have other outside people ensuring their success. So they push these agendas that, many of them don't even fully believe in themselves, right? But they push these things to further someone else's agenda for selfish reasons. And so not only do you have presidents who say things that don't reflect their country, but then you have very, very dire needs that go unmet. Last week, we talked about the economic freedom fighters. Olga was talking about this. They wanted everyone to boycott Woolworths. It's a store, and first of all, go to South Africa. I love shopping at Woolworths. I got everything. I get their gummies. They usually have beef gelatin gummies there, and they're so good. And they have cakes and stuff. But it's a full out grocery store. There's another Woolworths that has clothes and stuff. And the EFF was saying we need to boycott these products from Woolworths because they come from Israel. And the general response in South Africa was like, so first of all, we already are struggling with food, right? We already are. The economy is very, very bad, and there's a lot of food insecurity and all that stuff. And now you're going to tell us to boycott even further and not eat certain things just because you don't like Israel? What is wrong with you? Not to mention the fact that we don't have beef with Israel. So now you want us to forego eating because you have some sort of political agenda that you want to pull out. We see right through you. So that's the sentiment. So when you see South African governments, people, I want you to remember that does not reflect the people on the ground. There's a very, like we just talked about, there's a very coordinated disinformation campaign against Israel and the Jewish people that's going on now, and it's global. And the whole point is, it's just like Black Lives Matter, is to get you to think that the people standing in front of you speak for everyone. So then you say things like, well, man, why is the black community anti-Israel? Well, it's not the case, right? But you have these people who swear to you that, no, they're speaking for the black community. And I'm telling you, that does not represent the vast majority of Africans on the continent. It's just not true. Evidenced by the fact, and a couple weeks ago we showed this, there were, as you know, right after October 7th happened, there were standing with Israel like rallies all over the continent, people just celebrating and waving the Israeli flag and saying, no, Israel, we stand with you, or with you. That is the true sentiment on the ground. It is. Staying with South Africa, the chief rabbi, Rabbi Goldstein, he, in his Shabbat prayers, this Shabbat he removed the government from the official Shabbat prayer. Now, usually, in the rabbi Shabbat prayer, he includes the government of South Africa, and he has for a long time. This time, he removed it, and he sent a letter to the Jewish community detailing how he changed the prayer. That was originally composed by Chief Rabbi Harris, so this isn't even something he started, right? And it's been recited every year on Shabbat since 1994. So that's what, 29, almost 30 years now. This prayer has been recited. And he says, such a change is reserved for extreme situations, for government violations of morality so grotesque, they undermine the integrity of our prayers. But then he noted, and this is what I'm telling you, that South Africa has not seen the spike in anti-Semitism that's being seen all around the world, which is a testament to how different the citizens of South Africa are from their government. So that's not just South Africa, people. I'm telling you, that is the sentiment in the majority of African countries, the majority of the people on the ground. And that's kind of the theme here, isn't it? Right? You have Hamas, who's doing all this stuff, who launched October 7th, and you have people on the ground in Gaza who are crying out. They don't get heard. Their voices aren't represented, and Hamas has a different agenda. The leaders have a different agenda. Now, just making sure I don't have any questions here. Sometimes I forget to check the, okay, we're good. Check the statuses or check the comments while I'm talking. So that's what's happening on the ground, right? Africa is very much watching what's going on. And when I say Africa, I'm talking about the African people. One thing I also have been noticing, just as a side note, at least on social media, some of the activists that I've been just tracking. And when I say activists, some of them are anti-Israel. But I mean, like black activists, some of them might be African activists, like young political, leaders, communists or whatever. But one thing that I am tracking, there's beginning to be this almost like a connecting of the dots, or at least a recognizing of the dots, right? The connection hasn't quite been made. What do I mean by that? I did retweet this, but I actually decided to delete the retweet because I realized the person I was retweeting from has posted a lot of stuff against Israel, and I didn't want to make it look like I was endorsing her profile, right? But I watched this video of a girl who was talking about the former prime minister of the Congo, Patrice Lumumba. And not to get into all of Patrice Lumumba's politics, right? Because that's not really the point here today. The point here today is that this was back in he was assassinated in 1961. And Patrice Lumumba was prime minister of the Congo. And one of the things that this young lady, this young activist was talking about was that he was assassinated because he was speaking a lot and doing a lot of things toward the Congo being its own independent country, right? Now, again, you can disagree with his politics, you can disagree with other stuff, but the point here that I'm trying to make is that her point was that he was very much for Africa using her own resources to better herself and strengthen herself, and stop importing from other countries, and stop importing her own resources that she gave to other countries, right? And that's another whole other discussion, that basically we as Africans can build ourselves up. We have the mineral resources, we have all the the stuff that we need to do it ourselves. And what she read was that he was not only was he assassinated, but it was a conspiracy between the U.S., Belgium, and the United Nations. I said, "Wow, that's very interesting." And I'm still researching on this, but what hit me was, what continues to hit me is that, okay, so let's just take a step back for a second, right? So now, for all the anti-Israel activists, one of the things that they love to do is cite the United Nations. The United Nations, the Commission of Inquiry, the United Nations resolutions. What did Amnesty International say? What did blah, 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 right? Now, some of these same activists will point to the fact that the United Nations had a hand in doing Africa dirty, right? In this case, Patrice Lumumba, right? The late Kofi Annan's case, the General Secretary of the United Nations, again, not a Zionist, but he even called out the fact at times that the United Nations seem to be strangely silent on other issues, especially pertaining to Africa and pertaining to Sudan. He was like, Sudan hasn't been able to say a word. And whenever we come together, you guys want to pass another resolution against Israel. What is this? Again, not a Zionist. But he's like, okay, but he's an African. And he's like, okay, what is this? Like, why can't we also address these things? Like, all of these things get shoved under the table. If we can just start to connect some of those dots, we can see that, okay, is this same United Nations that's been screwing Africa over, that's been covering up slavery in Africa, right? That's been covering for, I mean, I want to say slavery, I'm talking about covering for the Arab slave trade, Arabs trading, buying and selling African men, women, and children in slavery, right? The UN covering up for these Islamist groups all over the country, all over the continent, many of whom are backed by the Islamic Republic of Iran, right? The UN never speaks about that, strangely silent about the atrocities that plague Africa, yet very, very narrowly focused on Israel. Now, if you are not an Israeli, if you're not a Zionist, you're just an African looking at this, that is a kind of like, okay, look, I'm not even saying, I'm Israel high. I'm just looking at this going, why don't you ever talk about my issues? Why don't you ever talk about my problems? Why are we always talking about this one country? Why we always focus on this? What about the rest of the world? I mean, right? The world's a huge place. It's a tiny little country over here. Why are we so focused on that to the point where Africa's dying and we haven't even had a discussion? The word Africa didn't come out of your mouth for the last 3 months. Like, how come we can't talk about this? And if we can just start to connect those dots, we can say, okay, does this same United Nations that keeps screwing Africa over, are they really reliable when it comes to what's going on in the Middle East? We can see clearly they have an agenda. And if it's true that the United Nations had a hand in the assassination of an African prime minister because they didn't like his agenda, then maybe it's true that this same United Nations might be lying to us about other things. Maybe there is something fishy about the fact that this same United Nations is so disproportionately focused on the Arab-Israeli conflict. There has to be some sort of link here. Obviously, there is. We've talked about this before. The UN has a big voting block of Islamist and communist countries that vote in lockstep with each other when it comes to Israel. They become a big force. So there is an agenda that's there. But if we could just pull back for a moment, right? Get off of our whatever our ideology is and whatever makes us feel cool and look at that. Okay, so it's been established here that the UN is sketchy and full of it. So maybe we shouldn't take them at their exact word when they're coming against Israel. Maybe we should scrutinize this a little bit more instead of just taking a report from Amnesty International and just sharing it out without actually verifying anything. Activists, and I'm speaking to the young activists here, right? Like, let's wrestle with that for a minute, because I'm with you. I'm like, okay, I'm still doing my research, but I wouldn't put it past the UN to be a part of the assassination of an African prime minister or president because they were going against the agenda. I fully am like, yeah, I think that's very plausible that happened, especially with the Islamist communist voting bloc. But now an honest thinker would then look at some of the things that people have been saying, right? Hillel Noor has been a force for this for a long time, calling out the UN's bias, right? UN Watch has been a big force for this all the time. So let's just take a step back. You know, you don't have to wave Israeli flags, say Israel high. Let's just look at this for a second. Let's just take a second. Should we be trusting this same UN? It goes all the way back to, I'll talk about Hamas again. People keep taking these reports from Hamas saying that the body count is this high. And everyone goes, okay, Hamas, we're going to put that on the front page of New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNN, and we're just going to run with it. Hamas says Israel bombed a hospital. All right, Hamas, thank you very much. We're going to put that on the front page of all the major news publications. Oh, sorry, it wasn't. The hospital's fine. Oh, it's just a parking lot. Oh, actually, it wasn't even Israel. It was one of our Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Hamas says, oh, the body count's 10,000. Thanks, Hamas. I'm going to put that up there. Like, okay, that's either there's just a bunch of really stupid people, which in the media, which I'm sure there are, or there is a disinformation campaign. It doesn't matter what Hamas says. We're going to follow it because we need to make Israel look a certain way. Or, as our founder and CEO pointed out today, I think on Twitter, yesterday, I think he was going toe to toe with a journalist. His last name is Greenwald. I think I can't remember his first name right now. And he said that journalists are, in order to report fairly, Glenn Greenwald, thank you. You can see it. It's not a secret. Go on Twitter, you can see them go back and forth. Eventually, Glenn Greenwald just stops talking. But what our CEO points out is that in order to report fairly about what's going on in the Middle East, you're going to get labeled a Zionist. Why? Because if you report fairly the things that happened in sequence, this had happened first, that happened next, and then this happened, and that happened, and this happened. You're going to report on 1948 fairly and unbiased. You're going to point out the fact that no, there was not an Arab country called Palestine. It was the United Nations that had it. The word Palestine comes from something else. The Romans named it. That had nothing to do with Arabs. That the UN parsed out land. If you're gonna just tell the story, the way it's supposed to be told, in this day and age, you are going to be labeled a Zionist, a puppet for the Zionist regime, whatever labels you want to put on that. And so some journalists, to avoid getting that label on them, because for them it's not good for their careers, what they do then is that they capitulate to the lie. They propagate lies. They peddle in lies in there to make them seem like, yeah, no, I'm just, trying to be. If you're trying so hard to be unbiased that you lie so that you can seem unbiased, that's bad. That's not unbiased. If you're just telling a story that's unadulterated, this is what it is, then you tell it. Even if the outcome is not what you want it to be, that's not your job as a journalist. Is to tell people what happened. That's it. It's to tell people what's going on, what happened, what you see, what's being said. This person said this. That's it. If you're afraid to do that, then maybe you're in the wrong profession. So, so this is what's happening now. And we're taking these reports. So again, like I said, Hamas, the UN, same thing. So if the same Hamas who broke into Israel, raped women, burned babies in ovens, kidnapped, has over 240 hostages, torturing, videotaped themselves doing all kinds of gruesome acts, they're probably capable of lying as well, which means we probably shouldn't just take their reports at face value. We probably shouldn't be taking the reports at all. But we are. Same thing with the United Nations. Again, my young activists, if the United Nations is responsible for the assassination of Patrice Lumumba in 1961, okay, yeah, that was a long time ago, but corruption is as corruption does. Just because it was back in 1961, what makes us think now that the UN is clean? Let's then kind of scrutinize every single statement that comes out of the United Nations. I mean, my goodness, if you're an organization who played a role in the assassination of another country's president, you might not be a credible source for anything. And so we should and even if they hadn't, we always should look at things with scrutiny. But my goodness, maybe we shouldn't take what they're saying about Israel at face value and actually look at what's going on. So maybe that same United Nations that that kicked out the Israeli representative, or no, sorry, that was the United Nations. My bad. I said the wrong thing. That was something going on uh, in the African Union, I believe. But if you're the same United Nations that ostracizes Israel, right? The same United Nations that has come out with things that have had to be retracted over the years, it might be worth looking at it. And you know what? If your research and your wrestling and your battling on the inside and doing all this deep stuff to find the truth leads you to see that Israel actually isn't what all these people are saying they are, then so be it. If your pursuit of the truth has barriers on it because you don't want the truth to be this, because you don't want to look a certain way, you're not pursuing the truth. You're pursuing fill in the blank, your image, your brand. You want to be a certain person. You want to have a certain platform. That's not pursuing the truth. Sometimes pursuing the truth means the truth is something that's not very sexy and doesn't make you look very good. But if it's the truth, then it's the truth. And you should just accept that it's the truth and speak it. If you're not willing to do that, again, maybe you're just in the wrong space. You should be in a different space then. So, again, I want to reset. This is IPSE's forum on Africa, Israel, and Black America. I'm Joshua Washington, Executive Director of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. I want to do a quick commercial break and tell you November 19th, listen to me. If you live in North Carolina, South Carolina, if you live in Atlanta, it's only about 4-hour drive. I'm telling you, you need to make your way up to Fort Mill, South Carolina. We're having a massive Standing with Israel event. It's going to have lots of live music, dynamic speakers. We're going to have just beautiful displays. You have to be a part of this. It's free. You can register online. You can choose to donate if you want to. It's going to be a beautiful time. We have some guests joining us. It's going to be off the hook. You have to come. So listen, get your tickets. Come and join us. We would love to see you there. Oh, yes, ma'am. Miss Matrilla Hall, we would love to see you all there. Please. It would be so great to see you in person. Awesome. So that's that. Now, I want to I want us to back up for just a second. We're going to take a couple of years travel into the past to 2021. Okay. Because, we live in the age of information, and in the age of information, we get inundated with so many things. I mean, we could hear the most gruesome news ever, and like 3 days later, we have let it go in our minds because it's been replaced with so many other gruesome things. Right? I remember, I think it was a couple of years ago. I remember I heard Dave Chappelle talk about this, and he said that when he was a kid, when we were sending rockets into space, the space shuttle, the rocket blew up. And he said that, they were watching it live on TV, they were watching it, but then it blew up. And he said, the whole space shuttle blew up, and him and his students and his classmates were just kind of stunned. And the world kind of America was like at a standstill. And he said, I remember that day just being like a really, heavy day. And he said, but today for us, for people in our generation, he said, for you guys, it's like the space shuttle blows up every day. He was like, how are you able to contain it? How are you able to process all this when literally you have the information of what's going on all around the world at your fingertips, right? So it's easy to get callous, it's easy to get numb, it's easy to forget, and it's actually easier to manipulate someone into forming someone's opinion for them, because it's hard to sometimes remember stuff that happened before in context. So I want to back us up to 2021. Hamas is raining rockets down on Israel. That's how this whole thing got started. Okay. Thousands and thousands of rockets. People were saying this was because of Sheikh Jarrah. No one ever cared about Sheikh Jarrah. And one of the things that we found out afterwards was that Yasser Arafat, Mahmoud Abbas was up for re-election, and Hamas was running against him. And so, as you all know, Mahmoud Abbas is in 15 of his 4-year term, right? So he's been there for the longest. And one of the things that was revealed afterwards was that Mahmoud Abbas was worried that Hamas would win this election, and then Hamas would take over what we call the West Bank, what I call Judea Samaria. And so what happened? Well, he said that, Sheikh Jarrah, Israel's trying to evict these Palestinian residents from Sheikh Jarrah. Then it was a big brouhaha. It turned into a huge thing. There are protests, there are riots all over within Israel, and then all over the world. And that's what happened. Jews all over the world were attacked. They were chased. They were beaten. Elderly, teenagers, all that stuff. I mean, it was how some of us at IPSI made new friendships, because they saw that we were posting and defending and supporting Israel, and they started following us and all that stuff. But it was really an intense time, right? And I wondered a couple of things too about that, but suffice to say, so it's a very intense time. And what happened was, during those protests, during those riots, things were happening all over the world. Things were being said all over the world. And really pay attention to this, because this is something that, again, even us in the Israel advocacy space sometimes forget, because there are so many things that happen on a daily basis. But one of the things that was said, one of the chants that was made was intifada, which we've heard before. But then the next phrase was globalize the intifada. Okay? Intifada. What's intifada? Violent uprising. What happened during the first and second intifada? A lot of Israelis got killed, hurt, shot. Buses were bombed. There are people who blow themselves up in public squares. I have a friend who was a senior in high school during the second intifada. She tells me that, because you can't, like I said, in Israel, you can't stop life because there are threats. Life would never happen. Threats happen every day in Israel. So she would be riding to school on a school bus, scared stiff, wondering if this will be her last bus ride, because maybe 2 days ago she saw on the news that another bus was blown up by a terrorist who was during the second intifada. And whenever someone would get on the bus she didn't recognize, she would just, it was traumatizing. She's like, hey, this might be it. This might be how I go. And that was her entire senior year. Imagine your senior year of high school. Some of us were just thinking about college, couldn't wait to get out, having fun, skipping class, depending on who you were, whatever. No, her senior year of high school was spent wondering if she'll come home or if she'll be in one piece by the end of the day, right? Because buses were being bombed, where people were blowing themselves up on buses. That is what the Arab Palestinians call the intifadas, right? That term was coined from those events. Again, just like people celebrated October 7th in New York, this term was not coined by me. This term was not coined by Israelis. This term was coined by Arab Palestinians, by Hamas, by Palestinians. This term was coined by them. Okay? So now we're going to say globalize the intifada. And everyone's like, what the heck does that mean? Then the gaslighting starts. Oh, you guys, intifada just means uprising. Okay? It just means we got to rise up. It's just one of those rallying cries. Yeah, I don't know. Not sure about that, right? Mein Kampf literally means my struggle, right? But if you started saying, globalize Mein Kampf, that's a very specific phrase that was used for something very specific. And you decided to take that very specific phrase and apply it to this. Doesn't really. So there was a globalize the intifada rally in New York City. Again, New York, the theme here. In 2021, during all the riots. And they were chanting this. They were chanting this in New York. They were chanting this in LA. They were chanting stuff like, we don't want two states. We want all of it, which again, as just want to give a little tip. They used to say we don't want 2 states, we want 48. And that rhymed. At least that had like a rhyme scheme. I was okay. Now they say we don't want 2 states, we want all of it, which is, I'm like, that's a step back. There's no rhyme there. It's not really catchy. Like, you guys, like, come on now. If you're gonna do something, like, kind of make it so that we can kind of sing along. But that was it. They were chanting this in 2021, right? In London, there were 2 men with waving a Palestinian flag in the middle of public square in London, saying, F the Jews, rape their daughters. F the Jews, rape their daughters. F their mothers, F their daughters. F the Jews, rape their daughters. Not even, I didn't even say Israel. No, the Jews. And what's ominous to me is that intelligence also found out that Hamas has been planning, and Hamas says this attack on October 7th for 2 years. What was happening 2 years ago? This was happening 2 years ago. Daughters were raped. Mothers were raped. So we're looking at this, right? There's definitely a connection between all the stuff that was said and done in 2021 and what's happening right now. It's intentional. And people don't even realize that they're doing the bidding of these pan-Arabist, expansionist, right, imperialist, raping, murdering, this raping, murderous regime that seeks to expand. Ever since the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, in the early 1900s, he didn't care about. There was, first of all, again, there was no such thing as a Palestinian Arab back then, not in terms of ethnically, right? He didn't care about forming an Arab. He wanted Syria to stretch all the way down to British Mandate Palestine, and he wanted British Mandate Palestine to become a southern province of Syria. His goal, there's nothing about liberation for the Arabs in that. He wanted to kill the Jews. He orchestrated the Hebron massacre of 1929. He orchestrated the Arab riots of 1936 to 1939. He did those things, absolutely. But his ultimate goal was to unite the whole Arab world. That dream has not died. It's just grown, right? It's a global thing. And whenever you see these people around the world who are chanting things that are really strange, like F the Jews, rape their daughters, globalize the Intifada, that has nothing to do with Israel. That has everything. Now we're starting to see that Israel actually is on the front lines of this fight that the world, first of all, some of the world is already fighting, but we're all going to fight in just a moment. Or some of us are going to lay down and surrender. But Israel really is on the front lines of this. It's not just about Israel. Someone said 2 years ago was when Joe Biden came in, and yes, that is absolutely true as well. This administration released $6 billion to Iran, and no, that funding was supposed to know that we have to monitor. No, we don't know what's going on at all. The fact that we even have still been giving funding to Iran is just already something that's Israel has been monitoring, because that is bad news for Israel. Iran has been very clear about what they want to do. But we have been, since this administration has taken place, since the Biden administration has been the Biden administration, we have been breaking the law. The Biden administration is breaking the law. What law am I talking about? The Taylor Force Act. The Taylor Force Act was signed into law during Trump's administration. And the Taylor Force Act says we, as the U.S., our tax dollars will no longer go to the Palestinian Authority as long as they engage in pay for slay, or pay to slay. I think it's pay for, I don't know why. Pay for slay. What is that? That is when the Palestinian Authority pays the salary of terrorists who kill Jews. If I'm a Palestinian who lives in the West, in Judea, or even Gaza, because Hamas also pays these salaries, and I'm able to kill an Israeli, my family gets a monthly stipend. If I If I commit suicide while killing Jews, my family gets an even bigger stipend, a monthly between 8,000, 12,000 a month, even more. So first of all, okay, so there's money there, right? But the only job that's available is working for Hamas in this way, or being in upper echelons of Hamas and being flown out all over the world and living a very lavish life, right? So that was put into place. We stopped giving money to the PA. As soon as the Biden administration began, President Joe Biden started back funding to the PA in violation of the Taylor Force Act. You guys, this is illegal. We've been illegally funding. That is why when you'll hear our founder and CEO and us at IPSI say these things, we're not being inflammatory. It's true. We are funding both sides of this war. The U.S. is funding both sides of this conflict right now. We give aid to Israel, but it's not even aid because Israel does give us stuff in return, right? Military intelligence, all that stuff. But then at the same time, when we say we stand with Israel, and then we give hundreds of millions of dollars to the Palestinian Authority. And then Joe Biden just said again a few days ago, we're going to give for aid, for humanitarian aid, we're going to give this $1 million to that's, that's just going to Hamas, right? That's just going to Hamas so they can continue to buy weapons and shoot rockets into Israel. We are financing the rockets that are being shot into Israel. I don't know how else you can put it. I don't know how else you can put it. I don't know what another way what other money are they using? Other countries give them aid, but still the money that we're giving them, none of it is going to what it's supposed to be going to. It's not going to healthcare. It's not going to infrastructure. It's not going to building hospitals or rebuilding their school. Nothing. It is going straight into the pockets of Hamas, where our money is either paying for their mansions and their cars and their private jets and their different houses in other parts of the country and their homes in Qatar, or it's paying for rockets. Either way, we are responsible for Hamas's come up, right? We are responsible for the rockets. We're responsible for Hamas's filthy richness. The Hamas top leaders are billionaires. That's our tax dollars. The Taylor Force Act didn't go anywhere, so we're violating the law. We are violating the law by continuing to fund the Palestinian Authority. While we get up on a podium and say, oh, we stand with Israel's right to defend them. No, we don't. This country does not. And this country has blood on its hands. We are funding both sides of this conflict. It was that comment that took me off guard. I mean, that sent me down that path. But absolutely. So that rhetoric in 2021, from 2021 to now, this is, you guys, we can't see these things in just a vacuum. These things come together. So again, I said it last week and I'll say it again. Africa's enemies are Israel's enemies, period. Whether it's Boko Haram in Nigeria, Al-Shabaab in Kenya. I've been starting to follow what's going on in Sudan. And I'm not going to pretend like I know what's going on. I'm going to speak deeply to it. But there is a group that is terrorizing and it's displaced a lot of people, a lot of death and destruction. When you see terror happening on the African continent, know that most of the terror on the African continent is financed and backed by the mullahs in Iran. The same Islamic Republic, the same mullahs that say death to Israel, death to America, the same mullahs that Hamas thanked Iran. Hamas thanked the Islamic Republic for backing them in their attack against Israel. So this same Iran that's causing the burning that's happening on the continent of Africa is also behind the attacks on Israel. Hezbollah to the north in Lebanon has been launching rockets at Israel. That's Iran as well. That's Iran as well. That's the Islamic Republic. How then we can take a look at that and say that there's solidarity between Arab countries, like the leaders I'm talking about, between what's happening there and Black people? I have no idea. But rest assured, you guys, Africa's enemies are Israel's enemies, period. So there's a lot of stuff going on. It's not a very happy time, as you all know. We're still we're praying, we're fighting, doing what we can. We're still posting and continue for those who've been putting up posters, been posting about it. Don't let people forget that there are still hostages there. I don't even know how to be feeling right now. My child was gone for this long. I mean, goodness gracious. And it seems like the world has forgotten. The world came together for about 10 seconds on October 7th. And it actually even shocked me. I was a friend of mine talked to me. I'm a member recently of the Recording Academy. There was a function happening for the Grammys, right? There's a function, like a get together, that I couldn't go to. I couldn't go to because I already had a show. I had a festival to do in Reno. And this was on October 7th. So I wake up in the morning, I see texts from my wife. The plane's not landing. We're almost there though. And then we look at the news and we see that Israel's under attack, right? In a very, very unprecedented way. And the world was at a standstill for a moment. Slowly, people started to find out about it. I was able to talk to my band about it. And even at the festival, people were like, wow, what's going on? And a friend of mine told me at the function that even there, one of the guys stood up and said, we need to have a moment of silence for Israel, everyone. I don't care what your politics are. This guy's not Jewish. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care what you believe. I don't care what your opinions are on Israel. Israel's going through their 9/11. We need to have a moment of silence. Everyone turn on your flashlights and just be quiet for a moment. And she said, and everyone did. I was like, wow, man, I wish I was there for that. That would have been cool to be able to engage people on that level after that happened, right? I was like, wow. And I just found this out the other day. She was telling me. So that was like the world did for about 10 seconds. But we were talking about Ipsy. We said, as soon as Israel even starts to lift a finger to do something about what happened, the world's going to flip. And that's exactly what happened. Even before Israel did anything, people were already starting to say, oh, you guys are liars. No one was raped. Babies' heads weren't beheaded. You guys are just, come on now. That's just ridiculous. No one beheaded a baby. Some babies may have gotten burned or stabbed, but beheaded, come on, you guys. You guys are always making stuff up. I'm serious. This is what was happening right then. Not before Israel even did anything. I said, yep, as soon as Israel even launches anything, Israel's attacking Gaza. It's unprecedented. Israel's just bombing the crap out of Gaza for no, oh my gosh, how could Israel just because? And then there are even whole groups that said, there was a, I don't know if it was Jewish Voice for Peace. It was a group of Jewish people who put out a statement. I was Jewish Voice for Peace. We don't want our trauma to be weaponized against the Palestinians. I went, wow, that's those words I've heard before, but never in that order. Weaponize our trauma against the Palestinians. So what you're saying is, yes, over 1,500 of us were killed, slaughtered, raped, burned alive, tortured. Babies were thrown in ovens. Over 240 of us are hostages as young as 9 months old as Holocaust survivors, emaciated, starving, being tortured, being raped, being brutally abused. If some of them are even alive still. Yes, all that stuff has happened and it's still happening, all that stuff. But we don't want that to be the reason why we attack, because we don't want to kill civilians. What about those civilians? And why isn't there, and then all the ceasefire stuff? It's like, okay, ceasefire. Why don't we they're the ones who started fighting in the first place. As I'm talking to you, rockets are flying in from Gaza into Israel right now. That's how it started. Rockets were flying into Israel while Hamas was invading Israel. So the firing started with Hamas. If anyone's going to ceasefire, it's going to be Hamas. So I'm watching this. I said, wow, Israel barely did anything, and we're already on genocide. There's no reason for this. How could you do this, Israel? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So we have to do everything we can, Lord, people, to keep the faces, the names of these hostages front and center. We have to. Lest the world forget about it. The world's already starting to deny that there's even hostages in the first place. It is so So cynical what's going on. But we can't let the world forget about this. So our prayers, our hearts continue to be with our Jewish and Israeli brothers and sisters. And we pray for the swift return of the hostages. You guys, we're coming up on our hour now. I just want to say again, I really hope that you join us on November 19th. There's a lot of heavy stuff going on, and we will speak to it at the event. But there's going to be just lots of music, and what we're praying will be a night of just some sort of soothing, in solidarity, comfort, consolement, if that's what I think of, all those things in this event. It's going to be really great, and a really great sign and show of solidarity. If you are non-Jewish watching this, if you're a Christian, I encourage you to come. If you support Israel, you need to be here, be a part of it, and participate. For anyone who says that they stand with Israel and the Jewish people, this is the season now to do it. I was on a podcast with our good friend Jonathan Feldstein. We co-authored. When I say we, I say me, my wife, and really close friends, colleagues of ours, co-authored a book called Israel the Miracle. It'll be out soon. And he, one of the things that one of the panelists on the podcast said, I think it was Shelley, she said that it really seems now that October 7th has happened, it almost seems like everything else leading up to it was practice. And that's really what it is. If you say that you stand with Israel and the Jewish people, and I'm talking now to particularly my Christian friends, this would be the time to stand with Israel and the Jewish people. If you say you stand with Israel and the Jewish people all this time, and I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, and you're silent now, you never stood with Israel and the Jewish people. You did something that you thought was cool. You followed a trend, and shame on you. This is the time now to stand up more than ever. This is absolutely the opposite of the time to be scared. This is the time, if there was any time to not be scared, it's this time. Do not be fooled into letting your fear have you stay in your house. This is the time to stand up. This is the time now to stand up. Though all those other times were great and those were fun and those were amazing, and we made friendships and we made connections and all that stuff, and we felt warm and fuzzy inside. This is the time now. What did Clarence, what did he say? Wintertime soldiers, right? This is the time where you fight in when the weather is brisk and painful and cold, and right. This now is the time for you to show up. So if you are in the area, if you're not in the area but you can afford to be in the area, come out to Fort Mill, South Carolina on November 19th and stand in solidarity with Am Israel. Thank you, guys. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Join us next week, same time, same place. I hope to see you then. Thank you. Take care.